A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends. Welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles, and we are on episode number 21. And before I begin reading the section for today, I want to answer a question that a reader wrote to me this week with, and I'll just read part of his email. My questions arise from my wife's fascination with a TV show featuring a medium, Long Island Medium. I don't know how to reconcile the statements made about life after death with A Course in Miracles. So my questions are these. What happens after our bodies die here in this illusion? If we are not attached to a body, what's going on with us? What happens to our ego when our bodies die? It seems to me that our ego won't die until we awaken. But what about all of the wrong-minded beliefs we acquired during this lifetime? So this is one of those questions that everybody asks at some point just in life and has been asking since the beginning of time, and also students of A Course in Miracles ask as well. So I'm glad that he wrote in this question because I think it's something that'll help everybody. And I can answer this question as best as I know from my studies in spirituality, my work as a hypnotherapist, and as a dedicated student to A Course in Miracles. And really the short answer is nothing. Nothing really happens when we die. And I mean, not nothing, but nothing compared to what we're programmed to believe will happen. Some people who die from accidents in which there's a really quick death don't even know that they're dead yet. So literally nothing feels like it's happened. And if you've read any of Robert Monroe's material, he's a guy who was able to have out-of-body experiences at will and wrote about them in a couple of books. There's a seminal book called Journeys Out of the Body, in which he talked about his out-of-body experiences. And he used the out-of-body state to help people recognize that they had died and lead them to the next level, whatever that is. And he tells stories of helping people on the other side. And I met a man recently who has out-of-body experiences a lot, and he has said the same thing. He does the same thing in terms of helping people who have died to move on and to recognize that they've died. People like that who die and don't know that they're dead still have a perception of their body. They obviously don't have the physical body that they had in the world, but they have a perception of a body. And they need to be convinced that they've died. And I just find that really interesting and fascinating. So literally for them, nothing feels like it's happened. And A Course in Miracles says death is nothing. It says over and over again that death is nothing. Like in the movie The Sixth Sense, where he didn't know that he had died. And I hope I'm not spoiling the movie for anybody. I think it's been around long enough for people to know the ending, but it's that same experience that literally nothing feels as if it's happened. I think the death experience really depends on your level of enlightenment. And if someone has never given any thought to the afterlife, or if someone is atheist, etc., they might be really surprised that they continue on. They might have an experience like not knowing that they've died. But if someone has meditated and has given some thought to the afterlife, they'll know that they have died. And Buddhists have as their goal to be awake when they die. In other words, to be conscious and fully present through the death experience. The afterlife, just like the world and your experiences here in the physical world, to a certain extent, matches up to your belief system. So if someone really believes that they're going to hell, they then might experience a dark place for a time. If someone believes they're going to heaven, they might have a heavenly experience. And obviously, someone like a Baptist won't be greeted by Muhammad on the other side, just as a Buddhist wouldn't see Jesus welcoming him or her. So to a certain extent, your experience, just like here in the world, is of your making. But just as there's a collective shared experience we all have in this world, the sky's blue, the grass is green, bodies look a certain way, so do houses and buildings, etc. I do believe that there are shared experiences on the other side. And many people experience a light or a tunnel, and we've read about those in near-death experiences, and I've had people in hypnosis see those experiences as well in like past life regressions, leading them through the death experience. But for the most part, all of your thoughts are really the same. So if you're wrong-minded on this side, you'll be wrong-minded on the other side. If you're right-minded on this side, you'll be right-minded on the other side. And the Course tells us that the goal of healing is to lessen fear. So if someone believes that a dark place awaits them, then maybe that experience of darkness, which matches their perceived reality, is less fearful than a blast of godly light. And it's hard to say what lessens someone's fear in their mind. Most of us, in actuality, are more afraid of God than we are of suffering or darkness. That's clearly apparent in this world. So just like in this world, we can create a certain extent of our experience, but we can't alter other things. It's the same on the other side, I believe. Our miscreations, as the Course says, has limitations. So if you believe that you're in a dark place, you won't stay in a dark place. Obviously, you will move on from that dark place and learn those lessons on the other side and continue to come back until you've learned those lessons of forgiveness. If you've read Pat Rodegast's books, they were popular in the 80s, called Emmanuel's books, and there's like a 1, 2, and 3. They're really great books. And there's a line in that book that says, death is like taking off a tight shoe. And I always loved that. For most people, I think it's safe to say, because it's said so much by enlightened beings and masters and seekers, that death is a liberating experience. It's a freeing experience because it's a liberation of the physical world and the physical body. Though we have to be very clear that all of this is occurring in the mind. There's a belief that we are in the body, and there's a belief that we then leave the body, and we then experience things that way. But as students of A Course in Miracles, we have to remember that it's all occurring in the mind. And I do think that death, leaving the physical body, affords us a broader perspective. Just like when people go into hypnosis and they come in on their lunch break and they then have this amazing experience in hypnosis that allows them a greater perspective of their lives or whatever is occurring or their deeper beliefs. I think the same thing happens with death. Like, it affords us that broader perspective because we aren't in this dense physical world. We're not consciously connected to the world or our experiences here anymore. But I think it's a mistake to think that death equals heaven or happiness or peace. In fact, you can't be at peace until you've healed your mind of the belief in separation from God. And until you've healed that guilt in your mind and learned all of your forgiveness lessons and ultimately learning to forgive yourself, you won't find peace. And death doesn't create peace. Death doesn't do all of that. The death of the body doesn't heal the mind. The death of the body doesn't make you at one with God. Only the relinquishment of guilt does that. So you're right about that to the questioner. Our ego disappears back into, as the Course says, the nothingness from which it came when we awaken from the dream completely. And that's not going to happen in 40 years or 20 years or a year or whenever it is that we die. Until then, we still have this belief in separation. So learning then, it just makes sense, continues on the other side. And I've seen that, again, through hypnosis with myself and with clients of classroom type experiences on the other side as well. And A Course in Miracles repeatedly addresses death because death is really the projection of the ego thought system. Death equals the ego thought system. And A Course in Miracles makes it very clear that there is no death. So what does that mean? It means that our spirit is immortal. It's eternal. Our mind is eternal. So if you turn to page 66 in the Manual for Teachers at the very end of your book, it's question number 27. What is death? And we won't read this now, but maybe it's something you want to read after this podcast episode. But if you turn to page 67, paragraph 7, sentence 1, it says, "Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part." So death is the hardest illusion to overcome. And that's why we have to be vigilant against the belief in it, against accepting that it's real on any level. Because if you accept that death is real, then you accept that this whole illusion is real. So this whole illusion is resting on that belief. We have to be vigilant against the belief in separation. Of course, death is the ultimate separation, isn't it? I mean, when we think of that separation and we grieve for our loved ones, it's because we believe that we're separate from them. So from the Course's perspective, you're not your body. You are a mind dreaming that you are a body. So the experience of what happens after you die involves a dream body. You're dreaming you have a body, then you dream that you leave that body, but you're still the mind that's having the dream. So even the quote, death of the body is really just a dream. The experience after death is just a dream too. So of course, that's not our experience. But it's helpful to understand that A Course in Miracles is non-dualistic. Only oneness with God exists. So the afterlife, as we think of it, is still a dualistic experience, even if it's just our astral bodies instead of our physical bodies. Now, that's closer, some would say, to reality with a capital R, to this idea of oneness, but it's still not oneness with God, our true reality. The Course says that when everyone has learned their atonement lessons, then God will take the final step. And we don't really know what that is or what that looks like, and we can't know that. But everything except that final step, we can know is a part of the dream of separation. So on the other side, it's obviously different from this physical experience. It's a different experience. We think a thought and it's a reality and all kinds of things, but learning still exists. We're still continuing to chip away at the guilt. We're still learning to understand our true identity. We're still forgiving and doing all of those things that we're trying to do here. We see things clear, but we aren't enlightened. So we usually have to come back and learn more lessons. So I tend to think of death as like watching one of those interactive movies where you put on those interactive goggles and you think that you're in the 3D movie and you're interacting with these other things that really are just imaginary. They aren't real. And death is like turning the channel and all of a sudden you're in a new interactive movie. It's sort of like that to me. So I'm still the same. I'm just interacting with a different experience. But the truth is, even when I'm interacting in those experiences, I'm really just sitting in a chair, pretending that I'm having those experiences. So that's the Course's perspective, that non-dualism. You're really outside of all of this. I just posted on my Facebook on Friday a Course in Miracles quote, "You are traveling but in dreams while safe at home." So we're still safe at home. Nothing's really happened. We're sitting on the chair, pretending that we're involved in these movies or pretending that we're involved in this dream of a physical world and then an afterlife. But really, from the Course's perspective, it's all the same. It really can't be said enough that death is nothing. It's just, who do you want to guide you through that experience? The Holy Spirit or the ego, fear or love? Because your experience of death will be different depending on your teacher. So in terms of wrong-minded beliefs that we acquired in this lifetime, as you asked, there's only one wrong-minded belief, and that's the belief of separation. There's only two thoughts in the mind, love and fear. So again, that fear or ego thought won't go away, as you suggested, with the death of a body, because the thought is in the mind. and the body's just a figure in that dreaming mind. So we let go of the figure, and the thought still exists. The only way to heal that thought is through relinquishing fear and guilt. And if you have a fear of death, just ask Jesus to help heal your mind of that belief. But also, meditation is very helpful because meditation is like a mini death. It relinquishes ego thoughts and individuality and the world and the body. All of that disappears in a good meditation session. So it's almost like a good prep for death. It'll help you to be awake more and to have less fear of the experience. Also, you could read Robert Monroe's books, which are really great if you like, and they'll help you to begin to see death for what it really is. But again, the short answer is nothing, really. I think of it as a nice liberation, like taking off that tight shoe and maybe a respite from the physical world and the body, and a happy return home after a long trip, a new perspective that helps put things in perspective. And then it's really about planning your next life or doing what you need to do on the other side to continue fostering learning. And we'll talk more about death in A Course in Miracles as we continue on, because the Course talks a lot about it. And I'm sure I'm forgetting to say something really important that the Course says about it. But I'll leave this conversation for now with these really important words of A Course in Miracles. There is a risk in thinking death is peace. Okay, so we'll continue with our reading, and we are on Chapter 2, The Separation and the Atonement, Section 6, Fear and Conflict, on page 28. And this section is really talking about how fear is our choice and what we need to do about that fear. All right, so let's begin with paragraph 1, sentence 1. Being afraid seems to be involuntary, something beyond your own control. So being afraid is a natural response of choosing the ego as our teacher. And once we've chosen fear in our mind, we then project that outward. And we seem to be fearful or anxious because of something in the world or in our body or in our mind that we can't control. 2, yet I have said already that only constructive acts should be involuntary. So constructive acts are acts of extending love, like the miracle. You may recall miracle principle number 5 on page 3. It says miracles are habits and should be involuntary. And that is really connected to miracle principle number 3. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. And that's why they should be involuntary. So he's talking about a miracle here. 3, my control can take over everything that does not matter, while my guidance can direct everything that does, if you so choose. Meaning we can't control our own minds. We need Jesus to help us at this stage of where we're at. In other words, we need something outside the illusion to help us. And that part of us can control the illusion or the dream. He's asking us to choose to ask him for help. 4, fear cannot be controlled by me, but it can be self-controlled. So fear can't be controlled by Jesus because he can't make us not choose fear. The choice to choose fear can't be controlled by him. That's our choice. That's why it's self-controlled. 5, fear prevents me from giving you my control. Your decision to choose the ego over Jesus is what prevents him from helping you. Your belief in the illusion, your belief in your identity as a body, all of that prevents him from giving you any of his control. 6, the presence of fear shows that you have raised body thoughts to the level of the mind. You have allowed body thoughts to take precedence over your mind. You've given them a power that they don't have. And anytime we give the power to our body or to our behavior, what we do with that body, there's always going to be fear because of that choice, because it's a choice to choose the ego. It's a choice against God and the truth, and that will always lead to fear. 7, this removes them from my control and makes you feel personally responsible for them. Again, it's another way of saying that you've chosen to believe in them. And as long as you believe in them, he can't get in. All he needs is a little willingness for us to say, I could be wrong about what I believe. I could be wrong about this situation. 8, this is an obvious confusion of levels. So he's talked about level confusion before, believing that there's a power in the world and in our bodies, thinking that there is a creative ability somehow in the dream rather than in the dreaming mind. Paragraph 2. I do not foster level confusion, but you must choose to correct it. So he's not confused, but we are. And so we're the ones who need to correct it. Again, that comes from being willing to see something differently. If something is causing you pain, if it's a behavior of yourself or of others or of something happening in the world, you have to go back to your mind and say there must be another way of seeing this, of looking at this. And that's correcting the level confusion. 2, you would not excuse insane behavior on your part by saying you could not help it. You have to be responsible for what occurs. You're not a victim of the world or of your thoughts. You wouldn't choose to eat a bucket of ice cream and then say, I just can't help it. I mean, a lot of people try to do that, but it's clearly not true. Of course, you can help it. It's the same way with your thoughts. 3, why should you condone insane thinking? In other words, why should you allow this insane thinking? 4, there is a confusion here that you would do well to look at clearly. So he's going to tell us what that confusion is. 5, you may believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. And that's because we're so bodily identified. We forget that we have a mind. Most people walk around mindless. Most people think that their body and what they do represents who they are, and that's it, rather than remembering that they have a choice. So we're responsible for the behavior of eating ice cream, but not the thoughts that led us to do it. We're responsible for what we do in the dream, but not for the dream itself. That's how most of us think. 6, the truth is that you are responsible for what you think because it is only at this level that you can exercise choice. The only real choice we have is in what we think. In other words, who is guiding our thoughts? 7, what you do comes from what you think. So mind is the cause and behavior is the effect. 8, you cannot separate yourself from the truth by, quote, giving autonomy to behavior. Behavior isn't separate from how we're thinking. Behavior isn't something that just happens to us. We choose the ego and then the behavior flows. Or conversely, we choose the Holy Spirit or Jesus and the behavior flows. We can look around the world and see who's choosing love and who's choosing fear by what people do. And of course, that's a general rule. It's not always true, but generally that's true. 9, this is controlled by me automatically as soon as you place what you think under my guidance. All of this behavior in the world is changed when Jesus is our teacher. 10, whenever you are afraid, it is a sure sign that you have allowed your mind to miscreate and have not allowed me to guide it. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier about behavior mirroring our teacher, the ego or the Holy Spirit, or Jesus in this case. Paragraph 3, it is pointless to believe that controlling the outcome of misthought can result in healing. So you can't change your mind by just changing your behavior, just by not buying the ice cream anymore. That's not going to heal your addiction to ice cream. You have to change your mind about ice cream. Though again, as we've talked about in other podcast episodes, this isn't about not changing your behavior. Of course, you should change your behavior. If you're addicted to heroin, you should detox from heroin. Of course, you should stop buying the ice cream if you can, or the cigarettes, or the shoes, or whatever that is. That's a good place to begin. He's just saying that that's not going to heal your mind. 2, when you are fearful, you have chosen wrongly. Of course, you've chosen the ego, which is fear. 3, that is why you feel responsible for it. I think that's a way of saying why you feel so bad after choosing wrongly. 4, you must change your mind, not your behavior, and this is a matter of willingness. So I think another way of reading that is you must change your mind rather than your behavior, and this is a matter of willingness. And we already talked about that. 5, you do not need guidance except at the mind level. And that's where Jesus can help us, in a mind that's willing to see things differently. 6, correction belongs only at the level where change is possible. In other words, where real change is possible. Real change is changing our teacher. 7, change does not mean anything at the symptom level where it cannot work. So any changes in the world, less war and fighting, all of that isn't going to come from anything other than changing our mind. Changing our mind about the world, changing our mind about each other, changing our mind about the reality through forgiveness, changing the way we see each other. That's the only thing that's going to work. Paragraph 4, the correction of fear is your responsibility. So it's your responsibility to begin the process of correction by your decision to choose a different teacher. 2, when you ask for release from fear, you are implying that it is not. So here he's going to tell us how we should then ask. He's saying, don't ask me to release you from fear, because when you ask me to release you from fear, you're saying that the fear is real. So you're sustaining an illusion by asking to be free of the illusion. It's like saying, how do I get out of this hole? It implies that you're in a hole. 3, you should ask instead for help in the conditions that have brought the fear about. So you should ask for help in believing that you're even in a hole. How do I get out of this hole that I'm dreaming I'm in? Jesus wouldn't say, grab a hold of that stick. He'd say, wake up from the dream. There is no hole. So he's asking us for help in releasing us from the belief that there is a hole, that the illusion and the separation is real. Heal my mind of the belief in separation. 4, these conditions always entail a willingness to be separate. So again, heal me of the desire, of my desire to be separate. 5, at that level, you can help it. So I can help what I desire. I can change what I desire. 6, you are much too tolerant of mind wandering and are passively condoning your mind's miscreations. I quote this all the time to my hypnotherapy clients. You are much too tolerant of mind wandering, because I really believe that healing comes from a disciplined mind. And we're all much too tolerant of allowing our ego to take control of our mind and just let it wander all over into our own personal hell sometime. So, we're lazy, believing our dream is real and that it's dictating our behavior. Really, that's just all lazy thinking. 7, the particular result does not matter, but the fundamental error does. So the behavior, the end outcome, is always an illusion. So that's why it doesn't matter. But the error to be invested in believing in the separation does matter because it's the cause. So he's saying the result in the world, the effect in the world doesn't matter. What matters is that fundamental error you're making in your mind. 8. The correction is always the same. So the correction is always the same regardless of the behavior or regardless of the result. There's only one problem of separation and there's only one solution, which is awakening from that belief. 9. Before you choose to do anything, ask me if your choice is in accord with mine. So this doesn't mean that we have to ask Jesus before we decide everything like what to eat or what to wear. But perhaps we should surrender our day each morning, or surrender our sleep, our evening each night, and our decisions to Him in general. And it's not that I believe that Jesus will then tell us what to eat that day. Rather, it's that when we surrender, when we ask, what we're doing is we're bringing our mind into alignment with His. And once our mind is in alignment with His, then life becomes as easy and natural as breathing. Then we make right-minded decisions after that. 10. If you are sure that it is, there will be no fear. If you surrender and you ask and you trust, then you can't be afraid. Fear comes from trying to control, from believing that you have the answer, and from a lack of faith. So if you're sure that it is in alignment with His mind, there will be no fear. Okay, so I think we'll stop there and we'll finish this section in the next podcast episode. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, you can connect with me on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy, or at Twitter at Cynthia S. Morgan. And my website is cynthiamorgan.us, and you can connect with me through email on the website as well. I love receiving the questions. I love connecting with all of you guys. So thank you to those of you who have reached out and to those of you who are listening. And I hope that you'll join me next week as well. So if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.